The first thing she felt was a throbbing pain in her temples. Sharp, as if someone was hammering nails into her skull with methodical, merciless blows. This thought made her nevertheless raise her eyelids. The ceiling above her head was wooden, with dark beams covered with the patina of time. Unfamiliar, alien. She sat up abruptly, immediately grabbed her head from a piercing pain. The room swam before her eyes, for a moment turning into a blurry spot. A glass of water appeared in front of her. "Drink," said a man's voice. Slowly, small sips. The voice was low, with a hoarseness. Unfamiliar, like everything around. She looked up. In front of her stood a man of about 40 years old, tall, broad-shouldered, with brown hair touched with gray at the temples. The face was open, with wrinkles around the gray-blue eyes. The face of a man who smiles a lot. Now, however, he was not smiling. He looked carefully, with concern. The water turned out to be cool, with a slight taste of mint. She drank in small sips, looking around the room. Some jars with brushes. Nothing familiar. Not a single image that evokes at least some kind of response in memory. Panic rose from somewhere deep, squeezing the throat with an invisible hand. "Where am I?" Her voice sounded hoarse, alien, as if it belonged to someone else. "Who are you?" The man sat down on the edge of a chair next to the bed, without violating his personal space. "My name is Alexei Nikolaevich. This is my house in the village of Sosnovka." "What is your name?" She opened her mouth to answer, and realized that she didn't know. She didn't remember her name. There was emptiness before her eyes. I don't know." Her lips trembled. She looked at her hands, well-groomed, manicured, but they seemed alien. "I don't remember. I don't remember anything at all." Alexei frowned, but his voice remained calm. "Listen. The day before yesterday I was returning from fishing and found you by the river, not far from the bridge. You were lying on the bank unconscious, your clothes were wet. Apparently, you were carried away by the current. The river overflowed after the rains." Her gaze fell on her own clothes, a spacious men's checkered shirt. She turned away, instinctively clutching the blanket to her chest. "Don't worry," Alexei blushed slightly, "your blouse was torn and thoroughly wet. I gave you mine. Shirt and left your underwear. Everything else is drying." He pointed to a rope stretched near the stove, where women's trousers and a blouse with a torn sleeve were hanging. "You had a fever for 2 days. I tried to get to the regional center, call a doctor, but after a week of rain the road was washed out. There is no phone reception here, communication is only in the center of the village, and there are now problems there because of the power line." She watched at him, trying to understand whether this person can be trusted. An inner voice, the only thing that seemed to remain from the old her, suggested, "It's possible, you. Didn't he call the police?" "As soon as possible," he nodded. "But first I wanted you to feel better." She carefully got out of bed, holding on to the wall. She was led to the side, but Alexei did not rush to support. He was simply there, ready to catch if necessary. For some reason this inspired confidence. "There," he pointed to the door in the corner, "is a restroom. Primitive, but there is a washstand. I hung up clean towels for you." She nodded and, staggering, headed towards the door. A cracked mirror hung in the small dressing room. A stranger looked at her from it, a pale woman with a bruise on her cheekbone, with brown hair, tangled and still wet. Brown eyes with clouds, high cheekbones, a thin nose. A beautiful face, but completely alien. She touched her cheek, watching the reflection repeat the movement. "Who are you?" she whispered to the mirror, and did not receive an answer. When she returned to the room, Alexei was heating the kettle on the stove. "Herbal tea," he said, "it will help with the headache." "How do you know that I have a headache?" You winced and held your temples. He shrugged. I took care of my sick wife for 4 years. I learned to notice such things. He poured tea into clay mugs, added a little honey to it. Drink while it's hot. She clasped the mug with her palms, enjoying the warmth. Are you an artist? She nodded at the table with brushes and at the walls, where landscapes hung in simple frames, a forest in the fog, a river at sunset, fields of rye. An art teacher at a rural school, he smiled for the first time. I paint for the soul. She stood up, looking at the paintings closer. There were photographs on the chest of drawers, a younger Alexei next to a fragile fair-haired woman, an elderly couple on the porch of this very house, another photo with an elderly man, very similar to Alexei. Are these your parents, and this is the wife? Elena, his voice trembled. She died 4 years ago. Sorry, nothing. He turned away, stirring the coals in the stove with a poker. You must remember something about yourself. You had this brooch. He handed her a silver jewelry with large amber in an intricate frame. She took the thing, turned it over in her hands, heavy, obviously expensive. But no memories, beautiful, that's all she could say. But I don't remember where it came from. Sometimes, with injuries, memory returns gradually, said Alexei. We must give time. And if it doesn't return, he shrugged, then we'll solve problems as they come. As soon as the road dries up, we'll go to the area. There's a hospital, police. We'll figure it out. She nodded, absently stroking the amber. It's a strange thing. In the house of an unfamiliar man, having lost her memory, she should feel fear. But instead she felt only calm. As if something inside was saying, this man will not cause harm. I'm grateful to you, she said quietly. For saving. For caring. There is no need for gratitude. He smiled again, now for real, and the wrinkles around the eyes became more noticeable. In my place, everyone would have done this. She wasn't sure of this, but remained silent, warming her hands on a mug of tea. The rain drummed outside the window, the wind swayed the bare branches of the rowan. Autumn red berries against the background of a gray sky. Rowan. Something flashed in her consciousness and disappeared like a moth, barely touching the memory. She tried to grab the image, but it crumbled, leaving only a vague feeling of loss. It's quiet here, she said, looking out the window. Yes, Alexei nodded. The quietest place on earth. And strangely, this silence turned out to be the only right one. It did not cause alarm in her new, empty world. The rain did not stop. Day after day, the water flooded the washed-out roads, turning the village of Sosnovka into an island, cut off from the mainland. The sky was covered with a gray veil, and time seemed to slow down. In this forced pause, far from the past, which she did not remember, and the future, which she could not imagine, a woman without a name and memories learned to live again. On the third day, Alexei brought her clothes, simple, but clean, a woolen jacket, a skirt and warm socks. These are the things of Anna Petrovna's neighbor, he explained, carefully folding the clothes on the table. She lives at her daughter's dacha in the summer. I'm not sure that the size will fit, but it's better than my shirt. The things turned out to be too big, but she gratefully accepted them. Fastening the buttons on the jacket, I caught myself thinking that my hands remember. They handle the fabric deftly, with precise movements, as if they were used to this kind of work. I think I know how to sew, she said, examining her fingers. Hands remember. Alexei, who was heating the stove, turned to her. This is a good sign. The body sometimes remembers what the mind has forgotten. That same day, she went out into the yard for the first time, just to stand on the porch, exposing her face to the scattered rain. A small plot with a vegetable garden, a barn, a woodpile against the wall, an old apple tree, bent under the weight of an Antonovka. Humid air, filled with the smell of rotten leaves and smoke from a chimney. "Do you like it?" asked Alexei, who came out next with a bucket. Very quietly, she answered, as if the whole world stood still. "My father said, 'Silence is the music of God.'" "Your father? Was he also a teacher?" "No," Alexei smiled. "A carpenter. Hands of gold. This house is his work. He chose each log himself, attached every beam. He said that the house should be like a living one. Breathe, keep warm. Golden hands." The phrase echoed vaguely in the emptiness of memory. Something familiar, important. But the image slipped before it had time to take shape. On the evening of the fourth day she was already helping with the housework, sorting potatoes in the cellar, peeling vegetables for soup, sweeping the floor of the house with a broom. Everyday movements were easy, her body knew what to do. But she still didn't remember her name. "Let me call you Lyudmila," Alexei suggested at dinner. "If you don't mind. You just need to be addressed somehow, and you remind me of one heroine from a book, Pushkin, Ruslan, and Lyudmila. Remember? There is a green oak near the Lukomori. Lyudmila is there, faithful, strong and beautiful." He said this simply, without flirting, and immediately became embarrassed, lowering his eyes to the plate. She felt something warming inside. "Lyudmila. I like it. Let it be like this until I remember the real one." So she found a name. Temporary, but her own. On the fifth day, Alexei took out a chess set from the attic board. "Are you playing?" She shrugged her shoulders uncertainly, but, taking the knight piece in her hands, her fingers made the usual movement with the letter G. Apparently, yes. They settled down by the stove. The fire illuminated the board with a warm, living light. "Check on the 12th move. And you, it turns out, are a grandmaster." He grinned and immediately fell into a trap, losing his queen. Apparently, she played before. She herself was surprised at her skill. Maybe her father taught. Or her husband. She froze, feeling a pang of anxiety. Husband. The word hung between them. Perhaps somewhere a family is waiting for her, looking for her, worried. And here she is, in someone else's house, sitting by the fire with a stranger. And feeling at home? Alexei noticed a change in her face. "Did you remember something?" "No. It's just scary. What if I have a family? Children. But I don't remember them." He put the chess piece aside and looked seriously. "As soon as the road dries, we'll go to the regional center. We'll announce you, we'll contact the doctors. Someone will definitely respond." At dawn on the sixth day, he left to check the road. He returned wet, splashed with mud. "I tried to drive through," he shook his head. "It's no use." The zigzag skidded in the clay right up to the door. He barely pulled it out. "If it didn't rain, we'll stop. Only in a week we can get out." Lyudmila nodded, feeling a strange relief. A few more days in this cozy world outside of time and space. A few days with a person who became closer and clearer with every passing hour. "I prepared lunch," she said. "Go change clothes, and then we'll eat." She herself didn't notice how she switched to you, and Alexei didn't mind. After lunch, he took out the album and pencils. "Can I draw you?" "At the window, in this light. You look at the rain as if you see something there that is inaccessible to others." She was embarrassed, but agreed. She sat by the window, resting her chin in her hand. The rain drew patterns on the glass. A brooch with amber glittered on the neckline of her jacket. Now she always wore it as a talisman. "Don't move," Alexei asked, quickly running a pencil over paper, "and look out the window, as before." She peered into the gray veil of rain, and suddenly a picture appeared before her inner gaze, a sunny day. She is walking down the street with a little girl, holding her hand. A girl jumps through puddles, splashes fly onto her red boots. I remembered something, she whispered. I think I have a child. Girl. The pencil in Alexei's hand froze. Are you sure? No, she shook her head. This is just a snippet. Maybe just a fantasy. Alexei put the album aside and came closer. Remember the details. Something specific. Name, age. She closed her eyes, trying to catch the elusive image, but saw only the blurred silhouette of a child. I can't. Only red boots and a puddle. By the evening of the 7th day, the portrait was ready. Alexei showed it hesitantly, as if he was afraid of criticism. Lyudmila froze. An unfamiliar woman was looking at her from the paper, but in her eyes there was such sadness, such depth that it took my breath away. So I see you, Alexei said quietly, beautiful and sad. Strong, but lost. She did not find an answer and only touched the paper with her fingers, as if she wanted to stroke herself on the cheek. Warmth spread inside, not only from the understanding that she was beautiful in his eyes, but also from how deeply he saw her essence. The evening of the 8th day turned out to be cold. They sat by the stove. Alexei read Yesenin's poems aloud. I love you, dear homeland, I can't figure out why. The flames cast strange shadows on the walls, the wind howled in the chimney. Lyudmila listened with her eyes closed, and a strange feeling was born in her soul, as if she had been waiting for this very moment all her life. A quiet evening, the crackling of logs, a low voice reading about love for the motherland. When he finished reading, she opened her eyes and met his gaze, attentive, warm, in which one could read what he did not dare to express out loud. Tell me, she asked, are you afraid that I will remember the past? He paused, smoothing out the page of the book. I'm afraid, he finally admitted. And at the same time I want you to remember. Because you deserve to know who you are. And if there, in a past life, a husband and a child are waiting for me, does that mean you will return to them? He simply answered, and so it should be. In his voice there was the humility of a person accustomed to losing. She reached out and took his hand. For the first time in all days she allowed herself this gesture. I'm scared to remember, she admitted. Suddenly there is something terrible there. Suddenly I'm a bad person. Alexei squeezed her fingers. You can't be a bad person. I see your soul. You've only known me for a week. Sometimes weeks are more important than a year. They looked at each other through the flame of a candle, and something unspoken, fragile, arose between them. Lyudmila felt her heart pounding in her chest. Alexei's eyes reflected the same doubts, desire and fear, hope and uncertainty. He was the first to look away, carefully free his hand. It's late. You need to rest. When she lay down in bed, she looked at the ceiling for a long time, listening to sounds in the house. Alexei was fiddling with the stove, then the floorboard creaked. He went into his room. She imagined him lying awake, also looking into the darkness, thinking about her. Warmth and at the same time anxiety spread inside. Before going to bed, she took off the brooch, brought the candles to the light. Amber flickered mysteriously, keeping secrets, like her memory. A tiny fly froze inside the stone, an eternal captive transparent dungeon. Lyudmila ran her finger along the silver frame, and suddenly a woman's face flashed in her consciousness. Elderly, kind, wear it for good luck, dear. Now she is yours. The vision disappeared as suddenly as it appeared. Lyudmila pressed the brooch to her chest. Who is this woman, mother? Grandmother? Aunt? And who is this darling, she herself? The wind intensified, throwing handfuls of rain at the windows. Lyudmila closed her eyes, listening to the noise of the bad weather, and tried not to think that her heart was torn between the fear of remembering and the fear of forgetting forever. And also between her duty to the past and the feeling growing in the present, the feeling for the person who gave her a second chance. The morning of the 9th day brought changes. For the first time in a week, the clouds parted, and a hole broke through the window glass. Timid ray of sunshine. Lyudmila was standing at the window when Alexei entered the room with an armful of logs. "Look," she pointed to a gap in the clouds. "It seems the weather is changing." He came close, without touching, but so close that she felt the warmth of his body. "If the rain stops, in 3 days we can leave," he said, and there was a subtle sadness in his voice. Lyudmila remained silent. During these days, a special connection was established between them at the level of glances, gestures, unsaid words. They understood each other without explanation, guessed desires, anticipated movements. She learned to determine by the creaking of the floorboards where Alexei was in the house, by his breathing whether he was tired, by the wrinkle between his eyebrows what he was thinking about. The day passed in the usual chores. Alexei prepared firewood, she baked bread in a Russian oven. I remembered the movements of my hands, the dough pliantly crumpled under my fingers, taking the desired shape. "How do you know the recipe?" Alexei was surprised when the house was filled with the aroma of fresh baked goods. "I don't know," she shrugged. "The hands themselves remember." With worn-out armrests. The room was in twilight, only the fire illuminated their faces with warm reflections. Somewhere in the forest an owl hooted sadly, and this sound made their shelter even more comfortable. "Did I tell you about the stars over Sosnovka?" Alexei suddenly asked. "No." "In the summer, when the sky is clear, they are extraordinary here. They hang low, low, like bunches of ripe currants. It seems that if you stretch out your hand, you'll pick them." He paused, looking at the fire. "I would like to show you our stars." A different meaning was read in his words, and they both understood it. "But summer is far away," quietly she responded. "Yes, far." He raised his eyes, met her gaze, "But I would have waited." Her heart sank. They spoke in hints and unsaid words, but behind each there was an unspoken confession. "Alexei," she began, but he shook his head. "There is no need to say anything. I know that you can leave. That you, most likely, have another life to which you want to come back. I just want you to know." He paused, searching for words. "These days, they became the most important for me. After Elena, I thought that never again." He didn't finish, but his eyes spoke for him. Lyudmila rose from the chair, took a step towards him. The wood in the stove crackled, momentarily highlighting the figures frozen in front of each other. "I don't know who I was before," she whispered. "But I know who I am now. And now I want to be with you." He hesitantly raised his hand, touched her cheek so carefully, as if it were made of fragile porcelain. She leaned towards his palm, closing her eyes. Their kiss was restrained, as if they were afraid to frighten away the moment. But then something broke the dam that had been holding back feelings all these days. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer, her fingers tangled in his hair. "If this is a dream, I don't want to wake up," she whispered when they finally broke away from each other. "This is not a dream," she smiled. That night they loved each other as if there was no tomorrow. Perhaps it was so. Their tomorrow, their common future hung on a thin thread of uncertainty. But now, in each other's arms, they dissolved in the present, where there was no past, no future, only two and the space of love between them. The morning of the 10th day found them in the same bed. Lyudmila woke up first. For some time she simply lay there, watching the sleeping Alexei. In the dream, his face seemed younger, more vulnerable. She carefully touched the gray strand on his temple with her finger. He smiled, without opening his eyes, caught her hand and kissed her wrist. You are real. I didn't dream. She wanted answer, but at that moment something happened. A sudden sharp pain pierced his head, a bright light flashed before his eyes. She screamed, clutching her temples. Lyudmila. What's wrong with you? Alexei picked her up, looking worriedly into her face. But she didn't see him. Images, sounds, voices flashed before her inner gaze. Someone's thin childish voice called, Mommy, Mommy, look what I drew. I hear a child, she whispered. A girl. She's calling her mother. She's calling me. Alexei helped her lie down, brought her water. The pain gradually subsided, but the images became clearer. A girl of about 10 with light brown pigtails, in a school uniform, with a backpack on her back. Smiling, holding out a notebook with an A. Another picture, the same girl sleeping, curled up in a ball, and she, Lyudmila, straightens the blanket, kisses her forehead. I have a daughter, she said more confidently. Her name is Anya. Anechka. She turned her gaze to Alexei. In his eyes there was a mixture of joy for her and hidden pain. He understood, every returned memory brings their separation closer. That's good, he tried to smile. You remember. Memories came in waves. Then rolling in with such force that it took her breath away, then retreating, leaving only vague images. She remembered her full name, Lyudmila Petrovna Golubieva. She remembered that she owned a chain of hotels in the city Golden Hands. She remembered her mother, Vera Semyonovna, a kind woman with worn-out hands. What is this? Alexei pointed to the brooch that she still wore on her chest, a gift from my aunt, my mother's sister. She died 5 years ago. Lyudmila paused, amazed at the accuracy of the details. I buried her on a rainy day, exactly the same as when you found me. During the day, Alexei left to check the road. He returned an hour later, excited. It's drying up, another day or two, and we'll be able to get through. There's already a connection in the village. He waved his mobile phone. Do you want to call someone? She became thoughtful. There were still gaps in her memory, but she remembered that she had a husband, Stanislav, a tall man. For some reason his face remained blurry, unclear. Only the feeling of something unpleasant, alarming arose when she thought about him. No, she shook her head. I want to figure it all out myself first. I'd better go home and they're already. Alexei nodded, without insisting. On the evening of the 11th day, they sat on the porch. The rain stopped, the air was fresh and transparent. The full moon rose above the forest, silvering the tops of the pine trees. Tomorrow we can go, Alexei said, looking into the distance. Lyudmila was silent. With each returned memory, her anxiety grew. Something wrong, dangerous seemed in the fragments of the past. Life. The last thing she remembered was a quarrel with Stanislav before going to the dacha. He screamed, she cried. The reason for the quarrel remained in the fog, but the feeling of threat was clear. What are you thinking about? Alexei took her hand. About how strange life is. She squeezed his fingers. You saved me, came out, brought me back to life. And now I have to leave. I shouldn't. He turned to her. His eyes burned with determination. Stay. With me. We'll bring your daughter here. We'll live together, the three of us. I love you, Lyudmila. These words, spoken simply and firmly, responded to her with tenderness. How easy it would be to agree, start a new life here, in silence, with a person who sees and accepts the real her. Anechka, she began. I will love her like my own. Alexei said hotly, I swear, there is a good school here, clean air. Children need nature, space. Lyudmila pressed her finger to his lips. I can't just disappear. There, in the city, they consider me missing. Maybe they are looking for my daughter, besides me, only has a grandmother. I must return at least to solve everything correctly." He nodded understandingly. This was one of the qualities for which she fell in love with him, the ability to listen, understand, not insist. "I will go with you," he said. "I'll help you figure it out. And then we'll decide together," she finished for him. Saying goodbye to the house on the morning of the 12th day, Lyudmila experienced a strange feeling as if she was leaving her native place, where she had lived not for 10 days, but for many years. She walked around the rooms, touching objects, saying goodbye to everyone. She lingered by the stove, stroking the warm tiles. Here, within these walls, she was born again. "Ready?" Alexei asked, standing on the threshold with her things. She nodded, once again looking around the room. On the table there was a portrait of her, drawn by Alexei, a woman with sad eyes, looking into the distance. That woman no longer existed. In her place now there was another, remembering, knowing, loving. The car slowly moved along the muddy road. Alexei drove carefully, avoiding deep ruts filled with water. Lyudmila looked out the window, and with every kilometer that brought them closer to the city, the memory returned more and more actively. She remembered the last conversation with Stanislav. He was gloomy, twitchy, constantly checking his phone. "I'll go to the dacha, pick up my mother's things from there," she told him. "Now, in this weather?" He was irritated, almost angry. "Where are you going? The whole road is washed out. I'll only get to the bridge, then on foot." "It's not far. Do what you want." He waved his hand and went into the office. Then, failure. She remembered how she was driving along a forest road, how she left the car at the bridge. And then, darkness. And awakening in Alexei's house. "Something happened on that bridge," she said quietly, "something bad." Alexei threw a quick glance at her. "Do you remember?" "Not completely. But I feel that something terrible happened there." He squeezed her hand. "Whatever happens, we will figure it out together. I'm nearby." She smiled gratefully, looking at his profile. Whatever awaited her in the city, now she had an anchor, faith in this man. And her love for him. The second chance that fate gave her. The city outskirts appeared ahead. The city greeted them gray, rainy in the afternoon. After the silence of the forest, the noise of the streets was deafening, the hum of cars, the voices of passers-by, music from the open doors of shops. Lyudmila looked out the car window, and familiar buildings, and her memory returned more and more actively. Here is the department store where she bought fabrics. Here is the park where I walked with Anya. Here is the stop where they always met with Marina. Marina. The image of her friend surfaced in her mind, causing vague anxiety. Something connected with her was disturbing, but what exactly Lyudmila could not remember. "Where first?" Alexei asked, stopping at a traffic light. "To your home?" Lyudmila was going to answer in the affirmative, but suddenly she noticed 3 black cars with mourning ribbons on the street corner. "A funeral procession." "Wait," she touched Alexei on the shoulder. "Let us stop here." Something inexplicable, some kind of premonition made her say this. Alexei obediently turned to the side of the road. "Shall we take a walk?" she asked, and there was a strange tension in her voice. They got out of the car. The rain turned into a light drizzle, settling on her hair like silver dust. Lyudmila headed towards the funeral cars, as if led by an invisible force. "Why do we need to go there?" Alexei was surprised, but followed her. The procession moved slowly along the alley of the city cemetery. Lyudmila and Alexei kept at a distance, watching from behind the old poplars. The backs of people in black coats and hats, lowered heads, muffled voices. And suddenly Lyudmila froze, clutching the tree trunk. Among the mourners, she saw a familiar figure, a little girl in a black coat with blonde hair pigtails. A tall man walked next to her, holding her shoulder. "Anechka," whispered Lyudmila. "Stanislav." Alexei looked at her questioningly, but she no longer saw him. Her gaze was riveted on the procession. To the coffin, buried in flowers, which was carried by 4 men. To the wreath with a photograph. With her photograph. The world shook. There was a noise in her ears, as if she was again drowning in that forest river. "Lyudmila," Alexei's voice came as if from afar. "What's going on?" She couldn't answer, her throat was tight. She just pointed with a trembling hand at the procession, at the wreath with her image. "Lord," Alexei breathed out, hugging her shoulder, This is me," she whispered, finally finding her voice. "They are burying me." As if in a nightmare, Lyudmila watched her own funeral. Here is Anechka, her girl, sobbing, clinging to Stanislav. Here is an elderly woman, mother, Vera Semyonovna, with a tear-stained face, clutching a handkerchief in her hands. And here is Marina, in a strict black suit, with her hair gathered in a tight bun. She stays slightly behind Stanislav, but in her pose, in the way she puts her hand on his elbow, something possessive is read. And he does not move away, on the contrary, for a moment he covers her fingers with his own. This gesture, fleeting, almost imperceptible, like lightning, illuminated Lyudmila's memory. The last pieces of the puzzle fell into place. A week before her disappearance, she found a note from Marina in Stanislav's jacket pocket. A few intimate lines that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Lyudmila was confused then. Didn't he know what to do? Talk to her husband? With a friend? Pretend that nothing happened, and then she found strange letters in the mail, notifications about loans that she did not take out. Huge sums. Threats from some people demanding immediate payment. Now everything was falling into place. The puzzle was taking shape in a terrible picture. "They weren't looking for me," she said, watching the coffin being lowered into the grave. "They are burying me." Without a body, it is impossible to officially recognize a person as dead so quickly, Alexei objected. "We need applications, searches, court decisions. This takes months." Unless someone forged the documents, Lyudmila smiled bitterly. Look how Marina hugs Anechka. How she wipes away her tears. Takes my daughter. My business, probably too. And my husband. Standing behind the trees, they saw the priest pronounce the last words. As those present took turns, they throw handfuls of earth onto the lid of the coffin. Anya was sobbing so desperately that Lyudmila's heart was breaking with pain. She rushed forward, but Alexei held her back. "Stop, not now. First you need to understand what happened, my girl." Lyudmila's voice trembled. "She thinks that I'm dead. If you appear now, it will be a shock for everyone. Especially for the child," he said quietly but persistently. "We need to do everything right." She understood that he was right, but every sob of her daughter was like a knife in the heart. Stanislav sat down next to Anechka, told her something, stroked her head. But there was no sincerity in his movements, as if he was fulfilling a duty. But his eyes. They read not grief, but some strange mixture of relief and anxiety. When the ceremony was over, people began to disperse. Stanislav led Anechka to the car, and Marina went with them, holding the girl by the other hand. Lyudmila noticed how Marina whispered something in Stanislav's ear, and he nodded, and then helped Anechka get into the car. "Vera Semyonovna, they are sending her to her grandmother," Lyudmila whispered. "They are getting rid of the child." Vera Semyonovna and Anechka left. Lyudmila followed them with a look full of longing. "Do you want me to take you to your mother?" Alexei suggested. "Maybe we should talk to her first." Lyudmila shook her head. "No. If she sees me shocked, he will suspect something, she sighed shakily. I need to collect my thoughts. Understand what to do next. They returned to Alexei's car and got inside. The rain intensified, drumming on the roof. Lyudmila looked through the glass filled with drops at the cemetery fence, at the people leaving, at the fresh moundland, which now bore her name. They tried to kill me, she finally said. And they think they succeeded. Alexei took her hand. Are you sure? Yes. She squeezed his fingers with such force that her knuckles turned white. Stanislav has been acting strange lately. He was nervous, locked himself in his office, constantly spoke on the phone in a whisper. I found letters about debts, about some loans. Then a note from Marina. She paused. And Marina is my best friend, we started a business together. I trusted her as myself. Memories came in waves. Marina is the eternal number 2, always in the shadow of a more successful friend. How did I not notice the envy in her eyes before? She has been dating Stanislav for a long time, Lyudmila continued. Now I remember. They thought that I didn't see their glances, random touches. Or maybe they didn't care. She turned her gaze to Alexei. When I went to the dacha, it was raining heavily that day. I left the car at the bridge and walked. The bridge was slippery. Someone pushed you, Alexei finished quietly. Stanislav knew that I would go there alone. I told him myself. She bit her lip. And now he and Marina are arranging everything. My hotels, apartment. Everything I've been building for years. They didn't know that you survived. Alexei started the car. And so far this is our advantage. Lyudmila nodded, wiping tears. We need to contact the police. First we need evidence, Alexei objected. Otherwise, it will be your word against their words. They have already managed to frame everything as an accident. He carefully drove onto the road. I have an acquaintance, a former investigator. A reliable person, with a lot of experience. I think it's worth starting with him. Lyudmila was silent. Before her eyes, her daughter's tear-stained face and despair were still standing in the eyes of the mother, the false grief of her husband and the triumphant gait of her traitorous friend. The pain of betrayal was almost physical, but another feeling was breaking through it, cold, calculating determination. She not only survived, she returned. And now she will make them pay for everything. Let's go to your friend, she said, and then. I want to see my daughter. But I can't just appear to her like a ghost. We need to do everything right. Alexei nodded and drove the car away from the cemetery. Lyudmila took one last look at the fresh grave. Let the Lyudmila Golubieva, whom they knew, remain there, under the damp earth. The woman sitting in this car is new. Strong. Knowing the value of betrayal and loyalty. The gray sky began to darken. Evening was coming, the first evening of her new life. Pyotr Vasilyevich Kravtsov lived on the outskirts of the city in an old two-story house surrounded by an apple orchard. The gate creaked, letting Alexei and Lyudmila into the yard. An elderly man in a threadbare sweater and house trousers met them on the porch, stocky, with a tenacious gaze from under bushy gray eyebrows. Hello, Lyosha. He shook Alexei's hand firmly, then turned his gaze to Lyudmila. His eyes narrowed, as if he was trying to remember something. And you, citizen, I saw somewhere. Exactly, perhaps, Lyudmila smiled bitterly. I was buried today. Pyotr Vasilyevich did not show surprise, he just raised an eyebrow and sedately let them into the house. Come in. The story, I feel, will be long. The spacious kitchen smelled of currant jam and freshly brewed tea. The owner seated the guests at a table covered with an embroidered tablecloth, and without further ado, he put out the cups, the sugar bowl and the vase with bagels. Tell me, he sat down opposite, leaning his elbows on the table. From the very beginning. Alexei began with how he found Lyudmila by the river. She continued about awakening without memory, the gradual return of memories and, finally, about today's shock at the cemetery. Pyotr Vasilyevich listened in silence, without interrupting, only nodding occasionally. When they finished, he rubbed his chin. Well. The story is really interesting. And what do you want from me? Information, answered Alexei. And advice. You know everyone in the city, you have connections in the police, in the prosecutor's office. The old investigator thoughtfully tapped his fingers on the table. I already know something about this case. In the city, that's all they talk about. A successful businesswoman, the owner of a hotel chain, fell. Igorevich stated that you went to the dacha and there, apparently, fell from a bridge into the river during a thunderstorm. I didn't fall, Lyudmila said quietly. They pushed me. Perhaps? But Golubev brought 2 witnesses, colleagues from the architecture department. They allegedly called you that evening, and you said that you were going across the bridge. And then the connection was interrupted. False witnesses, Lyudmila muttered. I didn't call anyone. He also presented a certificate from the Hydrometeorological Center about strong currents after heavy rains. Like, the body could have been carried away for many kilometers. The search was stopped after 3 days. 3 days. Lyudmila exclaimed, and they bury them right away, without a body? Pyotr Vasilyevich shook his head. This is, of course, strange. Usually the procedure for declaring a person dead without a body takes at least 6 months. But, he looked meaningfully at Alexei, there are ways to speed up the process. Especially if you know the right people and have money. They have money, said Lyudmila bitterly. My money, that's it, nodded Pyotr Vasilyevich. Your friend, Marina Krasnova, has already managed to re-register your share of the business for herself. According to the papers, it turns out that she had a will from you. What will? Lyudmila slammed her fist on the table so that the cups jumped. I never wrote anything like that, of course. But it's not difficult to forge a signature, having access to your documents. Especially if there's a notary involved. Sergei Ivanovich? Lyudmila guessed. No, it can't be, he was always so decent. Everyone has their own price, the old investigator shrugged. Sergei Ivanovich has a son's dead abroad. It was convenient for them to work with him. Alexei put his hand on Lyudmila's shoulder. What about his daughter? The girl was sent to her grandmother, answered Pyotr Vasilyevich. Supposedly to recover from shock. In fact, as I understand it, she was simply disturbing the newly made couple. Lyudmila closed her eyes, trying to hold back the approaching tears of rage. What else do you know? Your husband is deeply in debt, Pyotr Vasilyevich leaned forward. He lost in an online casino. We are talking about an amount with 6 zeros. 2.5 million, Lyudmila said quietly, and the men looked at her in surprise. I remembered. I found the statements that he tried to hide. Exactly. And his creditors are not the people with whom you can agree on a deferment. Pyotr Vasilyevich rubbed his hand. Serious guys, bandits. They don't joke, either you pay, or... You understand. And my accidental fall into the river became the ideal solution, finished Lyudmila. He gets access to my accounts, pays off the debts, and the business goes to Marina, who has been eyeing him for so long. What about the documents declaring death? Alexei asked. How did they arrange everything so quickly? Stanislav has connections in the city administration, answered Pyotr Vasilyevich. And money decides a lot. There are documents, but they are most likely with violations. If you dig deeper, everything will fall apart like a house of cards. Lyudmila clenched her teeth. feeling a wave of anger rise inside her, cold, calculating. I need to see my daughter. And my mother. This is risky, Peter warned Vasilyevic. If Stanislav finds out that you are alive, he can take more drastic measures. I will be careful. Lyudmila rose from the table. Can you borrow a car? They've probably already taken mine. Take mine. Pyotr Vasilyevic took the keys out of the box. Just don't shine in the city. And come back here, you'll spend the night with me. We need to develop an action plan. The road took a little over an hour. Alexei was driving. Lyudmila sat next to her, nervously tapping her fingers on her knee. Thoughts swarmed in my head, jumping from one to another. Anya, mother, betrayal, revenge. Everything will be fine. Alexei squeezed her hand. We can handle it. She smiled gratefully. This word now sounded natural and correct. Vera Semyonovna lived in a typical 5-story building on the outskirts. An old house, peeling paint, a front garden with an acacia tree at the entrance. Everything looked exactly the same as in Lyudmila's childhood. Wait here, she asked Alexei when they arrived at the house. First, I'll talk to Mom myself. He nodded, understanding. Lyudmila put on dark glasses and a scarf, tied in a village style, low on her forehead, a simple disguise in case of meeting neighbors. Her heart was pounding like crazy when she climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. A familiar door, a call with the Melody Moscow Nights. Steps outside the door, light, hasty. Who's there? The voice of a mother, dear to the point of pain. Mom, Lyudmila said quietly. It's me. Open, please. Silence. Then a trembling voice. Ludaka? Yes, Mommy. I'm alive. Open. The click of the lock and the door swung open. Vera Semyonovna, gray-haired, haggard, with eyes red from tears, stood on the threshold, pressing her hand to her mouth. Lord, she whispered, daughter. They hugged right in the doorway, both crying. Vera Semyonovna stroked her daughter's back, her hair, as if not believing that she was real. How can this be? We buried you today, she whispered. I felt that something was wrong. I felt it in my heart. Lyudmila pushed her mother into the apartment, closed the door. Hush, Mom. No one should know that I'm here. Where is Anechka? She's sleeping. Vera Semyonovna wiped away her tears. The poor girl was completely exhausted. She screamed in her sleep, calling for you. She only fell asleep an hour ago. Lyudmila went into her daughter's room, small, with pink curtains and plush toys on the bed. Anya was asleep, curled up in a ball, placing her palm under her cheek. There was still a glisten on her eyelashes. Tears. The heart sank with tenderness and pain. Lyudmila knelt down by the bed, carefully touched her daughter's hair. The girl shuddered in her sleep, but did not wake up. I want to wake her, Lyudmila whispered, going into the kitchen to her mother. Let her rest. Mom, I need to tell you a lot. Over a cup of tea, Lyudmila outlined the whole story, the fall into the river, the lost memory, Alexei, the return of memories, and a terrible discovery in the cemetery. I always knew that something was wrong with this Stanislav. Vera Semyonovna said angrily, I told you, his eyes are shifty, dishonest. You were right, Lyudmila sighed. But I didn't listen. And this Marina? Vera Semyonovna continued. How she's been hanging around him all these years. I noticed, but you didn't want to see. Now they took everything, Lyudmila said bitterly, my business, money. They even wanted to take away my daughter. Not everything. Vera Semyonovna took her daughter by the hands. The main thing is that you are alive, and we'll deal with the bastards. Mom, I have to ask, did Stanislav visit Anichka? Vera Semyonovna snorted. Of course, once he stopped by for 5 minutes. He said that it was too hard for him to see the girl, she looked so much like you. She waved her hand contemptuously. And he himself was so well-groomed, happy. And Marinka was with him waiting in the car. Lyudmila clenched her fists. And what about Anechka, how is she? Cries all the time. Asks when she can return home. And he said that it's better for her to stay with me longer. Vera Semyonovna lowered her voice. Do you know what I think? They want to send her to a boarding school. I accidentally overheard their conversation when they were leaving. Marina said that the child would interfere with them building a new life. Lyudmila turned pale with anger. No way, I will return my daughter. And everything else too. What are you going to do? Vera Semyonovna asked alarmed. I have a plan. Lyudmila rose from the table. But first we need to settle the legal formalities. Pyotr Vasilyevich will help you find a good lawyer. Who is this Alexei? Asked the mother. You talk about him with such warmth. Lyudmila involuntarily smiled. The man who saved me. In every sense, she hesitated. I love him, mother. Vera Semyonovna looked carefully at her daughter. I see. Your eyes glow when you talk about him. Not like with Stanislav. He is kind, reliable. And he is for Anechka ull like it. Then act. Vera Semyonovna nodded decisively. I'll stay with the girl, don't worry. And bring these scoundrels to justice. Lyudmila hugged her mother. Thank you, Mom. For everything. I'll be back in a couple of days, when I prepared the ground. She took a last look at the door of the room where her daughter was sleeping. Take care of my girl, and you take care of yourself. Vera Semyonovna crossed her daughter. They are dangerous people, these two. Going down the stairs, Lyudmila felt a surge of strength and determination. No more doubts, no more pity. She will return everything that rightfully belongs to her. And she will make the traitors pay for every tear of her daughter, for every sleepless night of her mother. Alexei was waiting in the car. When she sat down next to her, he silently hugged her. Have you seen your daughter? He asked. Yes. She was sleeping. Lyudmila laid her head on his shoulder. Tomorrow we begin to act. We officially resurrect and submit an application to the prosecutor's office. I'm with you, he simply said, until the end. The car moved off. A struggle lay ahead, not easy, perhaps dangerous. But now Lyudmila was ready. She had plan, support from loved ones and a burning determination in the heart to restore justice. The city court building was buzzing like a disturbed beehive. The corridors were filled with journalists with cameras and voice recorders. The bailiffs had difficulty holding back the pressure of the curious. Of course. The case of fraud with the resurrected owner of a hotel chain became the main sensation of the year in a provincial town. In a small room next to the meeting room, Lyudmila sat next to the lawyer Alexander Dmitrievich Kornilov, the best specialist in criminal cases in the area. He was recommended by Pyotr Vasilyevich, and the old investigator was not mistaken. During 3 weeks of preparation, Kornilov collected irrefutable evidence of the intrigue of Stanislav and Marina. Everything is ready, said the lawyer, looking through the papers. Documents about a fake will, testimony from a notary who has already admitted to the forgery, statements about transfers of large sums to the accounts of offshore companies. And the main witness is you, Lyudmila Petrovna. She nodded, straightening her strict business suit. Today she looked impeccable, no trace of that confused woman with no memory who woke up in the house Forrester a month ago. You will appear in the hall only after my signal, Kornilov reminded. The effect of surprise is our main weapon. There was a quiet knock on the door. It was Alexei in a new suit, unusually strict and smart. How are you? He asked, approaching Lyudmila. Ready. She squeezed his hand. I just want this to end as soon as possible. Soon everything will be over. He kissed her forehead encouragingly. Your mother and Anechka have already arrived, they are waiting in the car. As agreed, the girl will see you after the trial. Lyudmila nodded, grateful for the care. They did not want to traumatize the child with the sight of handcuffs, screams and aunts, whom she always considered close people. "It's time," said Kornilov, looking at his watch. "Alexei Nikolaevich, take Lyudmila Petrovna to the side entrance to the hall. And wait for my sign." There was no crowd in the courtroom. Stanislav and Marina sat on the dock, both pale, but holding themselves with ostentatious dignity. Marina whispered something furiously to the lawyer. Stanislav sat in silence, nervously tapping his fingers on his knee. When the judge, a stern, middle-aged woman, entered the courtroom, silence reigned. "The case is being heard on charges of Golubev Stanislav Igorevich and Krasnova Marina Viktorovna of fraud on an especially large scale, forgery of documents and attempted murder." The procedure began in a standard way, identifying the defendants, reading out the charges, the question of admitting guilt. Stanislav and Marina simultaneously declared their innocence. "The court asks to call the first witness," the judge announced. Kornilov rose from his seat. "Your Honor, before moving on to the testimony, I would like to present key evidence, a refutation of the defense's assertion about the death of my client, Lyudmila Petrovna Golubieva." A whisper swept through the courtroom. The judge frowned. "Which client are we talking about? Lyudmila Golubieva is considered dead." "It is this statement that I want to refute." Kornilov paused, looking around the hall. "Your Honor, I ask permission to invite the victim, Lyudmila Petrovna Golubieva, into the courtroom." The doors to the side entrance swung open and Lyudmila entered the hall. In the dead silence that followed, only her confident steps on the parquet floor could be heard. Marina screamed, staggering back. Stanislav turned white as a sheet, grabbed his heart and began to sit on the bench. His lawyer rushed to support his client. "I apologize for being dramatic, Your Honor," said Lyudmila, approaching the judge's table. "But otherwise these people would never have admitted that they were trying to kill me." After a short break, during which Stanislav was provided with medical assistance, the meeting continued. Now Lyudmila was sitting behind table of the victims, and the defendants looked completely crushed. "Mrs. Golubieva, tell the court what happened on the evening of September 15th near the river," the judge asked. Lyudmila described in detail the events of that day: a trip to the dacha, a strange call from Stanislav asking to meet at the bridge, a sudden blow to the head from behind and a fall into the water. "I didn't see the face of the attacker," she completed her story. "But I know that Stanislav was nearby. He was the only one who knew exactly where I would be that evening." This was followed by the testimony of other witnesses: Pyotr Vasilyevich about procedural violations when declaring Lyudmila dead, a notary who admitted to forging a will, a bank employee who provided statements of large transfers from Lyudmila's accounts immediately after her death, and, finally, the key witness Alexei, who told how he found and saved Lyudmila. Under the weight of the evidence, the facade of the defendant's innocence began to crumble. Marina was the first to break down. "It's all him," she jumped up, pointing a trembling finger at Stanislav. "He came up with the whole plan. He owed a huge amount to some bandits. He threatened that if I didn't help, they would kill us ourselves." Stanislav looked up at her, full of hatred. "Shut up, fool, you yourself suggested getting rid of Lyudmila. She said that this is the only way to get her business." "You're lying," Marina screamed. "I loved you. I did everything you asked," they screamed, interrupting each other, throwing out the bile that had been accumulating for years. In their screams, truth, lies, and mutual accusations were evident. The judge knocked her gavel several times, calling for order, but it was already impossible to stop this flow of mutual accusations. "I just stunned her and pushed her into the water," Stanislav finally shouted. "The current should have carried away the body. How did I know that she would survive?" These words hung in the air like the echo of a shot. The confession that the prosecution had been seeking was heard. Marina covered her face with her hands and burst into tears. After the meeting, the judge announced a preliminary decision. The case would be transferred to the regional court for a final verdict, and the defendants were remanded in custody pending trial. Stanislav and Marina, now in handcuffs, were taken out of the courtroom. When Lyudmila left the building court, a crowd of journalists was waiting for her on the square. But she walked past them, heading towards a black car parked a little to the side. The door swung open and a small figure in a blue dress ran out to meet her. "Mommy," Anya rushed to her mother, wrapping her arms around her. "I knew it, I always knew that you were alive." Lyudmila knelt down, hugging her daughter to her, inhaling the familiar smell of her hair, feeling her little heart beating next to her own. They both cried tears of joy, relief, love. "Never again, do you hear?" Lyudmila whispered, covering her daughter's face with kisses. "I will never leave you." 3 months later, the regional court issued a final verdict. Stanislav Golubev received 7 years in a maximum security colony for attempted murder and fraud. Marina Krasnova received 5 years in a maximum security prison for complicity. Lyudmila was given back all the rights to the business and was paid compensation for moral damages. But by that time she was interested in something completely different. On one clear winter day, she stood on the porch of a familiar house, watching Alexei and Anechka making a snowman in the yard. Accepted Alexei. "You saved my mother," she said at the first meeting. "So you're like a prince from a fairy tale." And since then, a warm, trusting relationship has been established between them. After the trial, Lyudmila made a decision that seemed strange to many. She sold the city hotels and moved with her daughter to Sosnovka. Here, in a quiet village, where she once found a second chance, she began a new life. In the regional center she opened a small sewing workshop where local women worked. Business was going great. Many city clients specially came to her for exclusive models. Alexei continued to teach in a rural school, where Anechka now also went. He also opened an art studio for children, which quickly became popular throughout the district. They got married before the new year, quietly, without pomp, in the circle of their closest ones. Vera Semyonovna, who at first doubted her daughter's decision to move to such a wilderness, was thinking about moving herself. Her granddaughter needed a grandmother, and the house next door was just right, was for sale. Returning to the house, Lyudmila stopped at the threshold, looking around the yard. She remembered another winter day, when she stood here confused, without memory, without a past. Then there was only the unknown ahead. Now. "Mom, look," Anya shouted, pointing at the snowman. "I made him a smile from branches." "It's beautiful, honey," Lyudmila responded. Alexei came up to her and hugged her shoulders. "What were you thinking about?" "About how strange life works," she clung to him. "Sometimes you need to lose everything to find what is really important." "Do you regret?" he asked quietly. She shook her head, looking at her daughter, at the house that had become truly family, at the man who gave her not only life, but also love, not for a second. This is real happiness. Light snow was falling, covering the yard with a sparkling blanket. Ahead were long winter evenings at the stove, the spring awakening of nature, summer stars hanging low, low over Sosnovka. Whole life new, real, with people who truly love each other. The aroma of fresh baked goods could be heard from the house. Vera Semyonovna came to stay and spent the whole day doing magic in the kitchen. Soon they will sit at the big table, drink tea, talk, laugh. "Let's go into the house," called Lyudmila. Grandma baked pies. Anya ran to the porch with a joyful squeal. Alexei and Lyudmila followed her, holding hands. There was no more emptiness and loneliness in this house. It was filled with life, laughter, love. The house that became the beginning of a new story for all of them. And Lyudmila knew, no matter what happens next, now she is truly home.